Good evening, everybody. Good evening. You guys are looking beautiful tonight. Should I say this afternoon or evening? On behalf of Radio 1, I'm honored to be here, to be at the table when it comes to My Brother's Keeper initiative. Our creed at Radio 1 Columbus says very little about radio, but more importantly, focuses on opportunities and raising opportunities to improve the quality of life for African Americans here in Central Ohio. We know that through Scripture, it tells us that our people perish from a lack of knowledge. And I'm here in kind of a twofold capacity as Public Affairs Director for Radio 1, but newly as the Young Adult and Youth Pastor at New Birth Christian Ministries here in Columbus, Ohio, where I work with over 2,000 youth per week. When we talk about perishing from the lack of knowledge, you look at the word knowledge, it's a word that has two words inside of it, know and ledge. A lot of our youth fall off the ledge because they don't know. But not only don't they know, but a lot of times we're not willing to teach them. And so one thing we understand is that we can't continue to work in our own silos. We must come together, unite, put all these appendages together, and create what we see as a fist. And so tonight, we celebrate that fist. So give yourselves a round of applause for being a part of that great fist. So tonight marks that coming together, and on behalf of Radio 1, I am committing on behalf of us to make sure that we do everything that we can to support this initiative. And with that being said, I'm excited to introduce the president of this college, Dr. David Harrison. Please give him a round of applause as he comes to the stage.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the role that Radio 1 plays in this community. It's such an important asset for what we're doing. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a big deal for Columbus State to be hosting this. We feel like that this ought to be the home court for this initiative. We are focused in every way on the values of the My Brother's Keeper effort. Our faculty and staff are working shoulder to shoulder with others in the community on youth summits with Columbus City Schools, on any number of initiatives in this regard. This has been a focal point for the college in terms of really helping all students succeed and using education as a launch point for elevating the trajectory of families in our city. We are delighted to be part of this. Please consider us among your number in terms of really moving this forward. One of the things I love about Columbus is it's a community based on relationships. And as busy as everybody is, as diverse as some of our priorities are, the ability to pick up the phone with the most prominent leaders in the community and get work done, I think is something that sets Columbus apart. And the gentleman I get to introduce, Council President Andy Ginther, is chief among those kinds of leaders. Andy has served as president of City Council since 2011 and has served on council since 2007. Since he's been on council, President Ginther has chaired the Finance and Economic Development, Public Safety and Public Utilities Committees, and currently chairs the council's Rules and Reference and Zoning Committees. Andy is a champion for neighborhoods and has long fought for job creation, economic development, education, and safety issues. I had the privilege of serving on the Columbus Education Commission, co-chaired by Council President Ginther and Mayor Coleman, and saw firsthand the focus on connecting neighborhoods for the purposes of education. In November 2013, Andy announced the creation of the Greater Columbus Infant Mortality Task Force and charged it with developing strategies to reduce infant mortality in Columbus. He's a Columbus native and a proud graduate of Columbus City Schools. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our friend, Council President Andy Ginther.
Good evening, and thank you, President Harrison, and we're thrilled to be back at Columbus's Community College right here in Columbus State, and it's an honor to be with you and to work with you to provide help and hope for a brighter tomorrow. We know that Columbus cannot be America's opportunity city, a place where all people regardless of age, race, education, income, or status, can triumph and thrive if young men of color are not part of our success story. I want to congratulate Mayor Coleman and Councilmember Hardin for their leadership in answering the president's call to be my brother's keeper. Dr. King challenged all of us to do more for those around us by saying life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? I think Dr. King would be pleased with work that has been done in our city during the last several months. But we all must recognize we are at the beginning of a journey, not the end. It has taken centuries to erect some of the barriers to achievement that many in this room, our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones, face to succeed in this community. Some challenges were institutionalized into the fabric of society. Others are a result of economic and social segregation. And unfortunately, no one in this room can offer easy or quick fixes. But we do know this: when we work together, come together in a greater purpose to lift up one another, we can achieve any goal in this city. And we have a track record of success to point to. We must create education and job training opportunities that ensure a young person is ready to learn or ready to work. And here is why I know we will be successful. This plan to improve our community is not City Hall's plan or Columbus State's plan. It's your plan. All of you, the young people in this room who have committed so much time and energy to this process, the ones that are driving the solutions. The rest of us are your partners in helping to create a better Columbus. So on behalf of City Council, I want all of you to know we support you and look forward to working with you as we find new ways to answer Dr. King's question and help others succeed in Columbus. Because until every family and every neighborhood in our city is sharing in our success, we have work to do. And our dream for our great city can't be realized. It is now a great honor of mine to introduce a dear friend, a mentor, a great leader in this community who has devoted certainly the last 16 years leading our city, in years as council president and a council member, an attorney, partner in private practice, a great champion for our city and for men of color here and across the country. Please welcome to the podium our amazing and wonderful mayor, Michael B. Coleman.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's so kind. Please sit down. Thank you so much. You know, as Andy walks the room for another appointment, I can't tell you how happy I am about the way he has embraced this effort with MBK and all the other things we've done in this city. And I was interviewing with a member of the press today about all the great things Andy had done over the years. And I said, you know, he's one of the great council presidents in the history of the city. So the reporter reminded me that, Mayor, you were a council president yourself. I said, that's right. That's why I said he was one of the great council presidents in the history of the city. See ya. You know, in the final days of my administration, to see this come together in the way it has is a big deal. It's one of my most important efforts because what it has done is brought together people from all over the city to focus on men of color. And we have been doing that for some time, long before MBK. But I viewed this as an opportunity to go under the umbrella of the president. who made the right choices in life. He could have gone another way. But I wanted us to be associated and come together with the President's initiative. Things we have accomplished so far are things like the African American Male Initiative that Urban League is running for us, where we're trying to assist men of color to become positive role models in their own lives, in their own families' lives, and has had now some 1,000 men graduate from the Father to Father program, a tremendous success. And then the APS program is an effort in all our neighborhoods that attempts to, and successfully attempts to, get in front of violence of young people in the neighborhoods. And we've seen some extraordinary success in that regard. You know, I don't talk about it much because I'm a superstitious guy, so I'm gonna knock on wood right now. And it's wood. And I credit this effort, APS, as a part of the reason why violent crime in Columbus has declined by 30% in the past few years. And that's the truth. But I'm knocking on wood because it'll all turn around tonight. You never know. And then City Leaders is an effort where we're taking young men and women and trying to shape them into the leaders of our city for the future. And then Capital Kids is an after-school program. And we've had thousands upon thousands of young people to go through our after-school program where we feed them, we love them, and we train them up to be good, wonderful people. And the final thing is Restoration Academy. And Restoration Academy is an effort that assists former felons who served time in prison, who have paid their debt to society, to get them back in line through a 6-month boot camp. And it has been an extraordinary success in our city, where these former felons, those who've spent time in prison, are now employed, are now with their families, have been recreated. And we call it Restoration Academy because they restore the community through this 6-month boot camp, but they also restore their own lives in the process. And man, it has been a phenomenal effort, and it's one of the most proud things I've done as mayor. All of them are employed now in a community where you check the box, and if you spend any time in prison, you are no longer eligible to be interviewed for a job in some of these employment environments. We've taken that box away in the city of Columbus. And in fact, we've employed so many of these folks, and we're grateful, they're grateful, and it's worked. MBK is an important effort. It's a national effort. It's part of our president's dream, and we want to be part of that dream, to bring up African-American men, men of color, and lead them in the right direction. And I viewed it as an opportunity to really engage the White House with the city of Columbus and black men in our city with a national movement, to be part of something special, something important. And so back in December of last year, Shannon Hardin and I, Councilmember Hardin, convened 500 African-American men. Where's Keisha? Where is she? Keisha was in charge of that, and she did an outstanding job turning out folks over at the King Arts Complex. It was a cold, wintry day, but we had a lot of men inside working to develop ideas on how we can move forward with MBK in the city. And we said then we're going to come together in that summit, but we had a lot of work to do between then and now. And that's to have these forums, talk to our young people to figure out what best we can do to lift up and provide the best opportunities to African-American men. And so here we are today, 10 months later, and we have a plan. And the plan is to be executed in the city of Columbus. And you know what happens when we work together. You know what happens when we partnership. You know what happens when we collaborate. We succeed. And that's what we're going to do with MBK. And so I'm proud to have here Broderick Johnson, who's the assistant to the president. He's a White House cabinet and secretary and chair of My Brother's Keeper Task Force, who's here. If you could just stand. Came all the way from the White House to talk to us today. And then we have Senator Sherrod Brown, my friend, and one of the great United States senators that we have seen in this state, in the history of our state. Someone I care about and someone who's on the right side of the issues every single time, fighting for us every day in the Senate. Senator Sherrod Brown, if you could stand. And then there's Jiza Page, Councilmember Jiza Page, who has worked arm in arm, hand in hand, fighting for the citizens of our city, working with this effort as well. And I'm proud to call her a great member of Columbus City Council, Jiza Page. If you could stand. But I have the extraordinary honor to introduce not only one of my best friends, but the best Congresswoman in the nation, and that's Joyce Beatty. Come on up here, Joyce. She works tirelessly for this effort along with many other efforts. And I can tell you, in no uncertain terms, when we need help, who do we turn to? Joyce.
Thank you.
That's
My
it.
mayor. Thank you. Well, first, let me just say thank you to my mayor. And it is certainly an honor for me to be here. And I'm going to be brief, because anytime you can be on the stage and be the only sister standing up here, that speaks for itself. But let me just tell you how much I love the brothers. You see, I was brought up in the right way, because I loved my father more than anyone. And there's 5 girls in the house, and we only had 1 brother, so you know we had to spoil him and take care of him. So first I say to you, my good friend, Dave, Mr. President of Columbus State College. That's an inside joke to Broderick, who's going back to the White House, because today I only have 1 president, and that's President Barack Obama. But Dave, to you, to Andy, who had to leave, to Shannon, for being a part of putting this together and working with our mayor, Brother Ellis. All the young folks love you and follow you. To our mayor, to Broderick, who you've already introduced, and you're going to hear from my senator, as I like to call him. Thank you for being here, because all of these men and young brothers stand on your shoulders. This program is so incredible, with what my mayor and what Councilman Shannon has done, because we have to stop judging our brothers by their zip code. We have to judge them on their merit. We have to say to them, you know, pull up your pants, because you pull up your grades and you pull up respect and you pull up scholarship. And in this program, it helps to do that. So my message and my charge to all of the men in the audience here: you have to do a little more. You have to embrace a brother, because that makes a difference. And I'm proud to be here as a sister. Earlier, I said it to my good friend Broderick. Oftentimes we get into, why is it not us and why is it them? You know, why aren't we doing more for young girls? Because now everybody's talking about My Brother's Keepers. Well, let me tell you what I know to be true. It's a win-win. Someone with a daughter and a granddaughter, it makes me feel so proud and honored that I know My Brother's Keepers is a program that has gone across this nation, making our brothers a little stronger, making sure that our daughters will feel good about knowing that there is a brother next to them. And when I asked the president to say, when women succeeds, America succeeds, I said, President Obama, you need to say this because it's not just about the women. When we succeed, families succeed, men succeed. So today I say to all of you here, for my brother's keepers, the two most powerful words that I can say, and that's thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you're doing and what you will continue to do. Now, my real role for being here as a member of Congress is to introduce someone who is my senator. I'll let him today be your senator since he represents the great state of Ohio. I wasn't surprised when I was in Washington and Broderick said, hey, I'm going to be with Senator Sherrod Brown. I didn't even flinch because when you look at Sherrod's resume, it matches what he really does. He cares about family, he cares about young folks, and he understands that he plays a critical role in the Senate, in this community, in the state. He didn't just come here today. Earlier, they were in my hometown of Dayton. And knowing Sherrod, tomorrow he'll be in Cleveland. The next day, he'll be in Akron and Toledo, and then he'll be back in Washington, and he will be telling a story about how he saved the world. So today, join me for the next voice that you're going to hear. I stole that from Jaiza Page. Our U.S. Senator, no other than Sherrod Brown.
All of you in your life want to be introduced by Joyce Beatty at least once. It is like the coolest thing. Joyce, thank you. Shannon, thank you for your incredible leadership in this. Jaiza, thank you for the terrific work that you're doing. Zach was here a moment ago too. The young leadership, and I look out at this audience of young African American men, and I look at this audience, across this audience, and see the kind of young, vibrant leadership in this city, and it just gives you so much hope for the future. There's no place quite like Columbus and in what you're all doing. President Harrison, thank you, and America's greatest mayor. I mean, Broderick and I were in Dayton, in Joyce's hometown, as she said, and we were driving over, and we both have known Mayor Coleman for years, and we were just talking about what has happened in this city in the last 20 years. I lived in Columbus in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And what's happened in the city in the last 25 years is extraordinary. And I give Mayor Coleman a lot of the credit, but I give the energy coming out of Columbus State and Joyce and so many of you stepping up and just making this city into literally one of America's great cities. And Broderick knows that, and your ears should have been burning, Mayor. So you ought to wear a tie next time, though, too, if you could. Okay. The mayor's winding down a little. It's still, but it's, you noticed when they had the pictures up here, when the mayor was speaking, they had Shannon's picture up there too. So they're already kind of pushing a little bit. I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah. But Dane, I get the opportunity to introduce Broderick in a second. I want to tell you two stories. One of them takes off on something Joyce said. My wife and I live in Cleveland in zip code 44105. 44105 zip code means nothing to you except it should mean this. Before Barack Obama took office in 2007, the zip code my wife and I live in had the highest foreclosure rate of any zip code in the United States of America. And you know where this country was, where this economy was 10 years ago, and in what's happened with this president's leadership and the leadership of a lot of other people. But it really has mattered. But I was in Cleveland a year and a half ago on a cold January morning. It was Martin Luther King Day breakfast in Cleveland. And even though Columbus, when you hold yours, is 4 times the size of Cleveland's, I still sometimes go to the Cleveland one too. And a pastor said something we all know about, but we don't think about maybe exactly this way. And this pastor said, your life expectancy is connected to your zip code. Whether it's the east side of Columbus or whether it's Appalachia, or whether it's Grove City or whether it's New Albany. So much of the opportunity that people have in life comes from where they were born and the assumptions, as Joyce said, the assumptions people make. There are 2 communities in Cleveland about 8 miles apart, both outside of the city of Cleveland, one an inner ring suburb, one a little further out, 8 miles apart, where the life expectancy is 24 years difference. And we know what we have to do, and that means investing in early childhood education. It means better nutrition programs. It means doing what this city is trying to do. I know that Andy Ginther has been leading this effort with the mayor. I know Shannon and Ginther are involved, and others, and that we have the highest black infant mortality rate in America. The highest is Ohio. It's shameful. It means we've had governors and legislatures that don't invest in public health and don't invest in preschool and don't invest in public education and keep giving tax cuts to the richest people in town and not investing in what we ought to invest in. But it means we have so much more to do in this community. Columbus does it a little better, but nobody does it well enough in this state. Second story I want to tell you took place today when Broderick and I kind of kicked off this little White House Broderick Johnson tour when he came out to Dayton. And we sat in a circle with a number of mentors and mentees. But I want to tell you something before I tell that part of the story and bring up Broderick. About 6 years ago, I was at, President Harrison, I was the commencement speaker at the Sinclair Community College graduation. And there were 1,000 people in the audience, 1,000 graduates. And you know what a community college graduation, it's the most uplifting thing. There are people that are 20 years old, there are grandparents, there are people that have been down on their luck, there are people that have privilege, there are all kinds of people, most of whom are going to find jobs in the field they study in the community. And that's why community colleges are so important as Columbus State is. The president of the college said, I'm going to ask 2 questions to these graduates. He says this to me right before we start. I want you to listen, but I want you to look down at the first row. There are 7 chairs there. I want you to look at those 7 young people as I ask these 2 questions. So the first question he asked to these 1,000 graduates is, how many of you are first in your family to go to college? And as you'd expect, at community college, about half the students put their hands up. All 7 of those kids in the front row put their hands up. And then he said, and no surprise, then he said, how many of you have been told by a guidance counselor, an uncle, maybe a parent, or maybe a neighbor that you're not college material? How many of you have been told you're not college material? About 1/4 of the kids put their hands up. 5 of the 7 kids in the front row put their hands up. Those 7 kids in the front row, this was a Friday night, this graduation. Those 7 kids in the front row on Tuesday night had graduated from Dayton Public High Schools. So these kids who weren't college material, who never had family members who went to college, these kids got their high school diploma and their community college diploma the same week at the age of 17 or 18. And that's why what the President of the United States is doing with my brother's keeper, Joyce was at the ceremony at the White House when he signed it, why that is so important and why what Broderick is doing is so important. We sat around this table today in Dayton and listened to these young men talk, and some of them are not young men. Some of them were 8th grade boys still, and many of them have seen so much of this world that people that age probably shouldn't see. So many of them had not had much opportunity, but all of them were connected to a mentor who cared so deeply about them. And just to watch the mentors talk and to watch these boys and young men talk was just a sight to behold. And the best news of all, if I can tell you this, and I'm stepping on Broderick's maybe a bit on his talk, is how engaged the President of the United States is in this. You know how presidents, if this sounds partisan, I apologize, how Democratic presidents especially have, after they leave the White House, they do really good things like Jimmy Carter with Habitat for Humanity and how Bill Clinton with the Clinton Initiative. I think you can count on President Obama, who's, my God, he's still such a young man. He will be 55 when he leaves office. I expect a good quarter century out of him doing things like this. And I'm pretty close to the president. I don't know him so intimately that he shared his post-presidency plans with me, but I do know how much he cares about this, and we're so hopeful that my brother's keeper, it's not going away at the end of in January 19th, 2017, because we have a president who is personally committed to this year and beyond. And nobody represents that better than my friend Broderick Johnson, who has known President Obama for 10 years, has been a veteran of so many of the important things that have happened in this country, from family leave policy all the way up through his issue, but always concerned about particularly young people, particularly people that have not had every advantage in life, stepping up for them as the head of my brother's keeper. Broderick, my friend, come forward.
Good evening. It is great to be here in Columbus. I was so moved by what was said before me by the members of the City Council and by your great mayor and by the head of this institution, this great institution, and by the Congresswoman that I've gotten to know and to call a dear friend, and to Senator Brown. We go way back to when he was a member of the House of Representatives, and things actually were relatively normal. There was leadership, and I'm not going to get political here, but it was very different then. And so, but I was thinking, I get tremendous opportunities to go out across the country on the president's behalf and to talk about my brother's keeper, MBK. And it's oftentimes very, very humbling because I get to see what real people are doing in real cities across this great country and responding to the president's call to action. And it gets you past Washington and all of the intensity of the work that we do in the White House and the questions we sometimes have about, well, what's the real impact of the work that we do? And so I come here and it's clear the impact of the president's call to action. As the mayor said, it's not like you haven't been working on these issues for some time. We recognize that, we appreciate that. The difference now though, and since February of 2014, is that you have the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, the Commander-in-Chief, saying this is a priority for him and for his administration. That is unprecedented with regard to issues that affect boys and young men of color, to have the President of the United States leading the charge on this. And so it's unbelievable for me at times to think about the responsibility, the awesome responsibility that I've been given by this president that really fits into things that I've cared about deeply throughout my whole life. I grew up very humble roots in Baltimore, a city that has experienced, as you all know, tremendous trauma for many years, but it really has come to a head most recently with the unrest in Baltimore. I was able, on the president's behalf, to go back to that community in Baltimore, a place, quite honestly, that I thought I had kind of escaped from, right? Well, something like what happened with the unrest in Baltimore reminds you of where you came from and the values of the folks in that community, because for all the attention the media gave to what happened there, and believe me, there were some awful things that happened. It wasn't as bad as was often portrayed in the media. There were good people working to resolve the situation, to calm people down in Baltimore. But a couple days after things quieted down a little bit, we went to the high school. I went there along with Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, and Secretary of Labor, and the Secretary of the Treasury, who went there to talk about financial literacy with a group of young people who said, no one's ever talked to us about financial literacy, let alone the Secretary of the Treasury. But he was there on behalf of the president. But one thing of many that struck me about the young people that we talked to, because we did some My Brother's Keeper sessions, and we talked to boys and girls that went to the high school that was the school where they said the students came out and went crazy. Well, the students talked about how scared they were, actually, when they came out of school and saw police officers in riot gear and the subway system had been shut down. But one of the young women said to me, what hurts us so often is we think people don't see us. Right? People drive past us. And the only time people seem to see us is when we get in trouble. And we wish that would change. And so what so much of My Brother's Keeper is about fundamentally is seeing these young people and investing in these young people and saying to them that we love them and we understand how important they are. To be here today, I have to be honest, I'm a Michigan Wolverine. I say that quite bravely because, well, I don't remember, so I'll be honest, I don't remember the last time we actually beat the Ohio State Buckeyes in football. I can't remember. I'm not old enough, I guess. However, after we take care of Michigan State this week, we'll take care of you guys later in the year. So with that, thank you on behalf of the President of the United States. Let me say again to Senator Brown and Congresswoman Beatty, your leadership in the Congress is something that I greatly admire. And Senator, thank you very much. Sherrod, thank you for that trip to Dayton earlier today. It was wonderful to be there and to talk to those young folks, their aspirations about their lives. One thing that really struck me too, and I think struck all of us adults, is that those mentees talked about how they are mentors to other kids, that they give back already, that they understand the importance of giving back. That's very inspiring, of course. Mayor Coleman, you look pretty relaxed, man, but I know that your work, especially with regard to issues around MBK, will continue after you leave office. And that, of course, is something that we worry about as we do this work. Will things change when mayors come and go? It's really clear that it will continue here under your leadership. So I think he deserves another great round of applause for his leadership in this city. And Dr. Harrison, honestly, I was really quite astounded by hearing that there are about 30,000 students who go to school here. And you know how important community colleges are to the president as a beacon of opportunity for young people. So thank you for what you do at this great institution and for having me here today as well. I bring all of you greetings on behalf of the President of the United States. And I can tell you that he's aware of where I go because I have to report to him about MBK. I have 2 other jobs for the president, but the MBK one is one that he asks me about often. It's one of his top priorities. He has made it clear, Sherrod, that this work is life work for him and that when he leaves the White House, one of his enduring legacies in his life will be this work around these issues. He's already said that publicly. So we know that this is important to do while he's still president, but even after that, he will make that part of his work going forward. I remember once the president asked me about MBK, and I'd read a Wall Street Journal editorial that said MBK was great, and I think it's because it wasn't a government program or something else. But and I said to the president, well, we got this great editorial from the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post that says something nice as well. And he said to me in a way, and if you, those of you who've been around the president know that he has a way of sort of making you feel about this small when you say something that's kind of not quite what he was asking you. And he said to me, Broderick, you know, that's great, but I want to know how the young people are responding, how communities are responding to MBK. So I talked to him about some of the places that I had been, and he continues to ask those kinds of questions that are about what difference does the work make. You know, we've met in this community, in Dayton, in Detroit, where I was 2 weeks ago, in Baltimore, Washington, all over the place. We meet exceptional young people, exceptional young men who are overcoming great odds. But a big metric for how successful we will be with this work is when the exceptional African-American kid, male especially, is no longer the exception to the rule, but in fact is what we have come to expect, what the world sees, because we've got to get past the fact that young men of color, young African-American males are seen as exceptional and as having overcome great odds, but that they only represent a small part of our community. We really fundamentally have to change that. I want to congratulate Columbus. You know, there are several steps to becoming a My Brother's Keeper community successfully. It's not just that you raise your hand and say you are one, or point out that you've had programs going on for some time, but it's following a certain path the president laid out, and you've done those things. First, as the mayor mentioned, you brought over 500 people together back in December to talk about the work. I'm sure there were people who gathered who perhaps had never gathered before to talk about how to do this work collectively. The second thing, though, and a really, really important part, of course, is the release of a local action plan, which you are doing here today. That action plan is so important because it lays out a roadmap for how you are going to succeed, not just through the rest of these months and for a year or so, but long-term on this work and of the partners that have been brought together. I would just commend to you all, though, that you make sure that over time, the particulars of those metrics, how you will measure success, the goals you will lay out, that you lay those out very clearly so you have those to meet to test that against the efforts that you've made. Again, being able to do this work for the president is great. One of the things, though, that makes it even more great for me is that he expects it to be done as rigorously as anything else that is done out of the White House. That means it's not just nice anecdotes about people doing work in communities, but that we are able, with evidence and data, to measure things, and that we change the paradigm for how organizations do this work. Let's face it, there are a lot of people who spin their wheels, right, trying to do things to change some lives, and some are successful, and unfortunately some aren't. And so we need to make sure we know what we are measuring and how we can scale those things up so the investments are worth it, so people understand we mean business. So the president, again, is very clear about the fact that this has to be rigorous, data and evidence-based work that we can come back to and say it has made a difference. There are now more than 200 My Brother's Keeper communities across the country. That's since last September. In a little over a year, that's what's happened. There are 48 states that have My Brother's Keeper communities, including Alaska, Montana, Idaho, places you would not necessarily expect it. And it's not African American boys and young men of color necessarily. Of course, in Alaska, it's Native Americans, and there are 20 other tribal communities across the country where we have My Brother's Keeper communities. I won't tell you where the two states are that aren't MBK communities yet, but we will. They're in the Northeast. So if you've got contacts in Vermont, we do, but if you do, go ahead and tell them, join the club. And then New Hampshire. Two really important political states. Huh? All it probably would take is for someone to mention that in one of these debates, I suppose. So help us get those other two. I'm confident that we will, but those are the last two. In Detroit, let me give you some examples, though, of what I said about the importance of very specific agendas. In Detroit, the plan they announced in Detroit 2 weeks ago is committed to recruit and match 5,000 new mentors, employ 5,000 additional young men of color in high-growth industries, and to reduce suspensions by 50%, and enroll 90% of 4-year-olds in preschool. In Boston, the Boston Foundation has invested $3 million to expand a Safe Street initiative that involves coordination between the police department and the mayor's public safety initiative. Let me just say this too. It is extremely important to this work in these communities that collaboration that involves the police departments and boys and young men of color be successful. It should not be the case anymore that we have communities where the schism is so bad that people say, well, the reason crime is going up is because the police are just kind of giving up in that community. We can't have that happen. We need to work on building trust. And in DC, the MBK program has already recruited 500 volunteers to serve as mentors and to increase the number of students who are reading at grade level by 4th grade. In the private sector, this is what's happened over the last 20 months of MBK. And again, this is amazing because it's about boys and young men of color. Almost $500 million in new grants and in-kind resources have been committed to this work, $500 million. Leading foundations have also committed to invest $200 million in the next 3 to 5 years in communities like Columbus and all across the country. Equal Opportunity Schools has committed $100 million to redesign high schools and to make sure that AP and IP high school classes across the country include greater numbers of boys and young men of color. Let me talk about the work that I lead in the White House, specifically around public policy. I don't know if you all know this, but a law was passed in 1994. Sherrod, you probably were a member of the House when this happened, and that is to prevent the Education Department from being able to provide Pell Grants to incarcerated persons, right? This was part of the Get Tough on Crime thing, right? So that's not worked particularly well. We know the road to prison is oftentimes paved by poor educational opportunities. So for many people, of course, the path out is to get a GED, but even more importantly, to be able to get a post-secondary degree. So a few weeks ago, we had an announcement in Jessup, Maryland of an experimental program that the Secretary of Education has executive authority to do to provide Pell Grants on a limited basis, experimentally, to penal institutions in this country. That's on that end of it. Let me talk about the other end of it, and that is the beginning of school. Chronic absenteeism. There are something like 7 million children in this country who are chronically absent in any given school year. Chronic absenteeism can mean that you go to school 90% of the school year, but that you miss 18 days. That's like a month of school. There are 7 million children in this country who are chronically absent. You can all imagine what happens to children who are chronically absent from school. We know that what happens in many cases is those kids get in a lot of trouble. So we have launched a anti-chronic absenteeism initiative out of the White House through an existing federal program. I'm not going to go through the statistics. We know about the data and the statistics about the disproportionate impact that a lot of this country's problems have on boys and young men of color. And those all drive us to the moral imperative of this work of My Brother's Keeper. But there's an economic imperative as well. So we have a task force out of the White House that not only includes the Department of Education and the Department of Labor, but also the Department of Commerce, the Council of Economic Advisors, the National Economic Council, the Small Business Administration, the Department of Energy, and on and on. As the President has made very clear, this country cannot remain globally competitive if we continue to have so many of our young people missing from this society. The President says it best, very simply, America is stronger when we field a full team. The Council of Economic Advisors in that regard released a report that showed if we close the gap in labor force participation between 16 to 54-year-old men of color and non-Hispanic white men of the same age, total gross domestic product in the United States would increase by 2%, right? So that's a really simple measure of the impact of being able to employ boys and young men of color between 60 and 54 years old. Senator Brown and the mayor have talked about ban the box, right? Very, very important issue. 1 in every 2 African-American men by the age of 23 have an arrest. Those boxes on those employment applications don't ask oftentimes if you've had a felony conviction or a misdemeanor conviction. They simply ask, have you ever been arrested? And so that is such a disqualifying box in many cases. The President has called on the private sector, and we have work that we're looking at in the federal government to try to eliminate that box on employment applications. So again, we can make our country more strong economically. Just a few months ago, the President was in New York to announce a new startup nonprofit called the My Brother's Keeper Alliance that has invested $80 million in this work. It is a new nonprofit, a new startup with support from many of this country's leading corporations. During his remarks, the President said this directly to the youth who were gathered there, quote, "There's nothing, not a single thing that's more important to the future of America than whether or not you and young people all across this country can achieve their dreams." Again, there is nothing, not a single thing that's more important to the future of this country. And so in that regard, there's nothing more important than that we succeed at My Brother's Keeper, that we succeed now while the President's still in office, and that we succeed long term. Communities across this country are doing tremendous work. You all are doing great work here in Columbus. To do it under the umbrella of My Brother's Keeper really warms our heart and means an awful lot to those of us who do this work, but most importantly means an awful lot to the President of the United States. So, on behalf of the President of the United States, congratulations, Columbus, and I won't say anything else about the University of Michigan. Okay, all right. Now, I think I'm introducing Sherrod Brown to come back. Senator Brown, are you coming back up here? Oh, well, I'm announcing him back to the stage. Thank you all very much.
It's my pleasure to conclude the program, to bring Mayor Coleman forward with Shannon Hardin. One of the things I've noticed about this mayor, and I've known the mayor since before he was mayor, and just watching him both from afar and up close, is how Mayor Coleman's always looking for an opportunity to find something more for this city. And once he finds that opportunity, once he spots it, he brings it in. He then finds ways to implement it. He finds people to help him implement it. And that's really what's happened here with My Brother's Keeper. And he looks at Shannon and the talent that Shannon has to bring this forward. And Mayor, thank you for doing that. Shannon, thank you for your role.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. So, this began December of last year. Worked hard over this period of time. Even today, we had, I say, around 200 young African-American students at The Ohio State University, where we brought together an entire program of folks to work with them right there. And we've had forums, community forums, over the past several months, youth forums. You know, so many times the adults don't ask young people what they think. Well, we did. We talked to them directly over a period of time, and I think about 500 or so over the summer reached out to get their point of view and what we should be doing for them. What do they think? Not what we think, what do they think about what should happen? And so we began to focus on two domains. The first is workforce development, and the second is preventing community violence and promoting safety. Workforce development, creating jobs and skills and opportunities for young folks. And the second is standing in the way of violence and standing in the way of issues and promoting safety in our community. So before I bring up my co-chair, who is not even 30 himself, who has come up through our system to become a leader in this community, is a phenomenal thing. To see him now lead and to now be a co-chair of the MBK effort. I'm very proud of him. But before I bring up Shannon Hardin, I want to give the nod to a video that we're going to see. Hit it.
And that's how really the trouble started for me being in the juvenile system.
But one of the things that I really want to focus on is making sure that when somebody comes to that moment where they're ready to see another possibility for their life, that there's somebody there to help them along.
And that's this program.
Yeah, well, that's what My Brother's Keeper is all about.
A year ago today, we launched what we call My Brother's Keeper, a way to make sure that we're reaching young people who sometimes don't have the kind of opportunities that we want every American child to have. Close to 200 leaders around the country, mayors, tribal leaders, local officials, they have responded to this My Brother's Keepers Community Challenge. And they're setting up all kinds of programs, mentoring, apprenticeships, early childhood programs, internships, so that our young men and our young boys, particularly those who are at risk, have a chance to get a sense of what's possible for them. And we need more communities to step up. We need more businesses and philanthropies. We need more universities. And we need more individuals to get involved. If you're interested, go to whitehouse.gov/MBK. whitehouse.gov/MBK to find out all the opportunities that you have to make a difference in the lives of some incredible young people.
Well, certainly want to thank Mayor Coleman. We would not be here this evening without his leadership, without the work that he's done really over the past 25 years of his time in public service to get us to this point. Again, I'm Columbus City Councilmember Shannon Hardin. It's been a pleasure to work with the mayor and really with the community over the past year on this important endeavor. I'd first like to start with thanking those folks who were a member of the My Brother's Keepers Task Force. Would all the members of the task force please stand and be recognized? Thank you for your work over the past year. You can find the list of the task force members on page 8 of the report this evening. I'd also like to thank my colleagues in Columbus City Council, all of whom came out and participated in one of those youth summits, one of the task force meetings in the community session that the mayor hosted. Councilmember Zach Klein, Councilmember Jiza Page, Eileen Paley, Priscilla Tyson, and of course, Council President Andy Ginther. I'd also like to thank the numerous facilitators who helped bring these conversations together, and the boys and young men who provided us with this necessary feedback and information to get us to this point. At this time, I'm going to walk us through the report and highlight the most important findings. Throughout this process, we asked the young men 3 foundational questions. What does living a happy, healthy, and productive life look like? What is the major obstacle to living a happy, healthy, and productive life? What supports, people, opportunities, resources, and tasks do you need to live a happy and healthy, productive life? Through our facilitators, we did our best to capture the responses of our young men and boys. And why did we do this? Because we wanted these recommendations that came out of this report to be reflective of their experiences, not that which we believe their experiences to be. Those responses are outlined on pages 13 through 21 in the report. But for the purposes of this evening and the people in this room, I'd like to talk about the recommendations and the next steps the task force have come up with, and that starts on page 23. First, the report recommends that a point person in the mayor's office should lead and oversee the city's My Brother's Keepers efforts. By having someone within the administration, we can carry forward the momentum that has been built over the past year. Mayor Coleman and I want to ensure that this work is an ongoing commitment from the city to leverage community assets and programs for boys and young men of color. Next, Hands On Central Ohio should serve as the information hub for all of the resources and initiatives for the community and for service providers. Many of the people in this room remember Hands On Central Ohio as First Link. Many folks outside of this room do not remember that. So we must do a better job of helping Hands On Central Ohio get the word out. Getting the word out, however, doesn't help us if we do not ensure that Hands On Central Ohio has the capacity to serve the population that we're talking about. That means that means having an honest and forthright assessment of their capacity and helping them where it's needed. Our third recommendation is a big recommendation with a lot of moving parts. The city has to bring people and organizations together in the spaces of education, personal development, health and self-governance, and relationships and community. In the area of education, the city will need to continue to engage Future Ready Columbus. Dr. Lillian is here this evening, the new CEO and Executive Director of Future Ready Columbus, because they are already working in important areas that will move the needle on educational attainment for our boys and young men of color. As we say, the city is a partner in chief to the school system, and so we need to be mindful of our role. We see that being in the space of quality tutoring, after school and summer school programs, other wraparound services, and providing quality pre-K spots for Columbus's children. When we talk about personal development, cities should continue and coordinate work with the community to support our boys and young men of color where they are. We also need to expose our young men of color to career opportunities, job shadowing, internships, apprenticeships, and robust mentoring. Mentoring was a fundamental theme that came out of the conversations, both with the community and with our young men. The idea of constant coaching, so providing the appropriate level of mentorship to every young man based on his needs. We also need to be willing to continue to invest in those who need even more than mentoring. We need to invest in those who need a second chance. The city created the Restoration Academy under the mayor's leadership because we all agree that everyone in society needs hope and it needs to be able to fulfill their potential. We need to end the cycle of recidivism and repeat offenders. This recommendation is for people to live productive and fulfilling lives. We need to make sure that when people pay their debt to society, that they do not continue paying on that debt. We have to make sure that our opportunities exist for all of us, even our restored brothers. Finally, when we talk about service providers and programming, we are talking about the relationships that our young men have and their relationships with the community at large. The city and community need to build on the success of the APPS program. We need to build on this program specifically because it represents an investment in youth development and community safety. If we are able to map the hot spots of violence, we may be able to proactively connect the young people that are most susceptible to that violence with resources that would be most able to prevent it. This task force also wants to find ways to foster positive relationships between young men of color and the Division of Police. Whether it is one-sided or two ways, whether it is real or perceived, and in the light of the events around the country, we must do better to bridge any gaps that may exist between police officers and boys of color. We must guard against any distrust and discord that can arise between police officers and boys of color. Part of this is about developing an anti-violence campaign to promote nonviolent conflict resolution. All of these recommendations are strong recommendations. They are recommendations that push us to commit to the lives of boys and young men of color in the ways that may be challenging to us in the future. I say that because recommendations 4 and 5 are really challenges to policymakers, to myself and to my colleagues. The best part of all the summits, according to the youth, were that we spoke with them, we engaged them, and they were included in the decision-making process. So our 4th recommendation calls on us to include a youth voice in policy and decision-making. Some of that will include creating youth seats on boards, commissions, and working groups when appropriate. Another part of that is to continue to host these regular youth summits and town halls to solicit young people's input. And lastly, we need to set tangible goals, and I was glad to hear Mr. Broderick Johnson stated that we have to push ourselves to set tangible goals. We need to use the data to establish what the community will define as success for boys and young men of color. Then we need to define where we want to go so that we can hold ourselves accountable. If we don't set these goals and hold ourselves accountable, city and community together, then this exercise was all for naught. I want someone to come back to us in a year's time, in 5 years' time, and ask us, what have we done? I want to be able to say that we've done some things are in progress, and maybe we can do some things better. But those are the recommendations that were set out by Columbus boys and young men of color. There are also a few goals that the task force wanted the city to set out for itself that are in this report. I have begun the process of asking my current city council members to commit to these recommendations. All of this began with a challenge from President Obama to have this conversation. Mayor Coleman accepted the challenge, and together we got to work. Now we have been issued yet another challenge, this one from our own young boys of color. We as a community must determine if we are up for the challenge of closing that opportunity gap. I know that this city and this community are able to accept the challenge. I hope and I pray that we are willing to accept this challenge to be our brother's keeper. This is a work in progress. This is a living document. So there are many blanks that we need your help to help us fill in. With so much positive work being done in the community, our role as a city will be to facilitate, to coordinate, and to convene to make sure that all this moves forward. On Monday, October 26th, I will present this document to my colleagues on City Council. I hope that they will adopt a resolution taking these recommendations upon our own very shoulders as our commitment to continue investing and supporting our boys and young men of color. Earlier today, when we were at The Ohio State University, meeting with the young boys and rolling this report out to them, I told them that they have the ear of the city, that they have the ear of the greatest mayor in our city's history, and that they have the ear of our community. Tonight, the mayor is here, our council president was here, our congresswoman was here, our United States senators was here, and even the White House cabinet secretary is here. Our boys and our young men of color have come to us with their issues. It is time for us leaders to lead. I strongly believe we can do something about what's going on in the lives of young men of color. I pray that you will join me in this God-given endeavor of being our brother's keeper. Before I close, I would like to say a special thanks. Could Dr. Keisha Hunley Jenkins please stand and be recognized? We would not be here without the day in and day out work of Dr. Keisha Hunley Jenkins. Ms. Linda Capobianco, Randall Sistrunk, Edward Johnson, the CTV for being at every one of the youth summits. So all of the youth summits were streamed either live or put online. All of the task force meetings were streamed live or put online. And thank you for being here tonight. And I want to thank the community, you. This report is just paper if we don't work together to put it in action. So like I said, this is the beginning. That's why we call this a check-in, because there's still a lot of work to do. So I ask that you join us, that we get your feedback. In the report, there is information on how you can give us feedback. If you're doing a specific program, we want to hear about it, especially if it falls in one of the recommendations, so that we can then provide that information to the folks in our community. This is just the beginning of our commitment. I again want to thank our mayor for starting this, and by talking, putting together reports is one thing, but the mayor invested money. Invested resources in supporting our young boys of color, be that through the APS program, which is now a $1.5 million program, be that through the Restoration Academy program, which is more than $500,000 program. The mayor's leadership is more than just talk, it's about resources. And can speak with my colleagues and say that we will continue to support, engage our young men of color. Thank you so much for being here.